month study plan because I plan to take it in April. I feel like the Socratic method, is it?
Yeah, Socratic review method.
Yeah, I feel like that's been working really well for me. It helps a lot to be able to articulate exactly why I'm picking the question and exactly why I got it wrong in my own words. And I feel more confident in logical reasoning when it comes to that. Um, I guess just in terms of like my journey with with the LSAT studying, I started last April, I believe it was, and I stopped August, November time. I took a course in June and July, it lasted, and then took the August LSAT. It ended like basically a week before. Um, and I feel like it didn't really work for me, to be honest. I feel like it was just really hard to get in touch with community with that course, which I think that I needed at the time. And I feel like even then, I still feel like I'm able to really grasp what the questions are asking me. It's just more so my trouble is being able to dissect each question and kind of being to pick apart like the premises and the conclusion. Um, so yeah, I know what I have trouble with in each specific section. But yeah, how did you want to start things? Should I just kind of dive in with that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's good to hear your experience thus far. It
Mhm.
sounds like you weren't getting community in your previous course, but you are getting it in my course now. Is that right?
Yeah, so I am signed up for one of the logical reasoning courses for tonight, which is what I'm having struggling with the most, I feel like. So hopefully that'll help. I plan to do these courses like at least once a week when I have time because I'm also working full time. So
Good, good, good. Is that going to be your first time attending a class?
what was that? Yeah,
Is
it'll be
that
my
okay?
first.
Great. Well, I'm really excited for you to get into it because community is definitely one of the strengths with LSAT Unplugged. We have the live classes almost every night. We have the study groups almost every night as well. And a lot of people find study buddies, study partners in there to just connect with and collaborate. You could set up your own separate study groups as well. A lot of folks have done that, and because it's hard to go through it alone. And to have that back and forth, that dialogue, to be able to bounce ideas off each other and get to a point where it finally clicks is really something special that I've looked to really emphasize. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for you to get into that if logical reasoning and understanding questions better is an area that you've been struggling with.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like before, I think it was more so just like not being able to have like a clear head, and I feel a lot more clear headed now. Um, but I think it's like I know exactly what the question is asking me when I come across it. It's just, I guess, yeah, like being able to really identify the premises and the conclusions seem like such a big part of a lot of these questions, kind of like in role questions. It's really, those are, seem to be really difficult for me, as well as flaw questions, because I get so tripped up on all the different kinds of flaws when, yeah, like I get tripped up on the names and feeling like I need to remember the names when maybe I don't, and maybe I just need to know what's wrong with it, you know? Um, yeah, and I also, one thing that I do have difficulty identifying is sufficient assumption questions. Um, and yeah, I think also parallel questions are super hard for me.
Good. Well, it sounds like you've identified some key specific logical reasoning question types to focus on.
Mhm.
And the good news is I have a ton of workshops
Mhm.
in each of those areas inside the logical reasoning vault in the
Mhm.
course. I could send you links to a couple of those
Mhm.
later today so you could dive in. I go into a ton of detail. I have a half dozen workshops just on flaw questions. I have a couple just on role of statement and the other areas you mentioned too. So I'd encourage you watch those, get up to speed on those,
Mhm.
and then come to logical reasoning every Thursday, the live class, and ask your questions there for elaboration. But I've gone as deep as I ever have in those workshops.
Okay. Okay. I don't think I've gotten to those just yet, but I'll definitely look into that. Yeah, and like I said, I'm really looking forward to these classes. I think that they will be like definitely a game changer for me because yeah, studying alone is so hard and I've been doing it forever at this point. And yeah, I think I'm ready for some community, ready to like bounce ideas off of people and stuff. Um, yeah, I feel like something that I've been really good at, thankfully, is logic games. Like I've been able, like when I stopped studying in November, I was able to score really high in all of those sections most of the time. So that's something that I've been doing really well in, and I don't feel like I need too much tweaking on. But something that scares me is definitely reading comp. Like I get there and it's just like, oof, like I just don't know. I think that dissecting the arguments is just so hard. And reading comp is all about dissecting the whole thing. And it's all about the flow of the thing. And that's really difficult for me. So if you have any pointers on that, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one thing I'll refer you to for later is the reading comp deep dive
Mm-hmm.
classes in the course, where what I do, and I recommend this for you as well, I take an entire passage and I rewrite the entire thing in simpler language,
Mm-hmm.
paraphrasing it paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, word by word, translating every single element.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously are not going to do that on test day with the time constraint, but untimed for your review, it is incredibly valuable to make sure you understand everything they're saying, because it's too easy to just try and skim it and gloss over certain parts and give yourself this belief that it's beyond you when it's not. It's just the time constraint that makes it so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But breaking it down, you can understand better the role that each statement plays in the passage as a whole, and you'll learn where to focus and where not to focus.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I feel like that could help. Um, yeah, something else I wanted to ask. I haven't done another untimed test just yet. I wanted to kind of reset my foundation and just kind of like relearn everything. And I was wondering if you had any suggestions on when to start that back up.
I would say spend at least a couple of weeks on the logical reasoning areas and the reading comp as we've discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've done that, maybe at the end of February, then you've got a solid 2 months at that point to work on ramping up the timed elements. I would start at the end of February, beginning of March. I would start by doing individual timed sections,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
then do 2 timed sections back to back,
Mm-hmm.
then 2 timed sections, 10-minute break, one more timed section,
Okay.
and then 2 break 2. So building it up gradually, because oftentimes the first time test you take doesn't go so hot and you get really discouraged. But it's a process to build up that level of endurance and to also figure out your pacing. So I do recommend a more gradual approach. And you've got a solid 2 months from the end of February to build up to that.
That's actually such a good point. I think that it's so difficult to just kind of jump in and just sit in front of the computer and get through all of this. And like, how long is it? Like almost like 2 hours, 2.5 hours at
Yeah,
this
two and a
point.
half hours. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to just kind of ease into it. So that's really helpful. Um, so how long would you suggest that I do that then until I'm doing like back to back timed? Does that make sense? Like just a
Yeah, sure,
full.
sure. So the ramp up process,
Mm-hmm.
it could take place over the course of 2 to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How many tests would you suggest doing in that amount of time, 2 to 3 weeks?
I typically suggest something around 2 timed exams a week.
Okay,
So that puts you around 5 exams or so.
gotcha.
And if some of those are shorter as you're building up, then maybe you could do more sittings over that. You could do 3 to 4 sittings if they're not full exams over the course of a week. And then once you're building up to full length 4 sections plus a break, I would typically only do 2 of those a week because you want to have enough time to review them afterwards as well. And you
That's
don't want to burn out.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Okay, that's helpful. I have a list of things that I wanted to talk about here, so let me just look through this real quick. Um, Okay. So something that with reading comp, I feel like a lot of people, like from what I've seen and like just like videos that I've seen, it like I feel like I have this problem where it seems to be common, just like difficulty staying focused on the material. Do you have any suggestions on how to stay focused and stay interested, basically?
Yeah. You got to fake it till you make it. These are not meant to be exciting,
Yeah.
but if you can find something interesting about them or just pretend that you're interested, like you had to act interested, like if you were being interviewed for a job, whatever the interviewer says, you just have to smile and nod and act like they're the most fascinating person in the world. And over time, maybe you can come to believe it. It's true. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but these can be these random little factoids like the bottom of a Snapple cap. You know, it's like the fun fact. Reading comp passages are big lists of fun facts. You could also try caricaturing or exaggerating the different viewpoints in a passage.
Okay.
Or you can analogize them to things you're familiar with, like liberal versus conservative or objective versus subjective. A lot of times they fall along those lines, or you can paint them into that corner. If you oversimplify, it can be easier to get through.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. I had another question that just popped up in my head that escaped me. It's fine, I'll come back to it. Yeah, I feel like just like overall, I feel comfortable with figuring out how to like in retrospect, I feel comfortable with like figuring out what the question is asking me. But I think that when it comes to being under a time constraint, it can be very like it just feels a little anxiety inducing at times. And are there any strategies that have worked in the past to just like kind of stay calm even under time? Is it just practice?
Well, it's practice, but that's why I recommended the ramping up to get used to the timing. But mindfulness is also huge. If you can just regain your focus and break out of the quicksand or tunnel vision, if you're getting bogged down in a particular question, if you can recenter yourself and recognize that you're getting stuck, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and just say, you know what, I'm going to flag this one. I'll skip it. I'll come back to it later and move ahead. And if you can get your pacing to a point where you can generally move at a fast enough pace, you will have time to come back later.
Okay. Okay. So the question that escaped me came back.
Shoot.
I've heard mixed things about highlighting when it comes to reading comp. And I do feel like I get bogged down when it comes to highlighting and feeling like I need to highlight. What are your thoughts on that? What are your suggestions, would you say?
Try it out. Test it out. I mean, personally, I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
The highlighting tool is kind of clunky. It's not that precise. So some people love highlighting so much they will deal with that. But I would recommend playing with it a lot and seeing, can you, under timed conditions, smoothly use the highlighting tool during a full-time section of reading comp, let's say? And does it help you? More importantly, is it worth spending the time on that? Is it giving you anything extra that you couldn't get from jotting down a couple of notes on your scratch paper?
Yeah. I feel like the highlighting tool is super clunky and I don't like it either. I think that writing down, I guess I get bogged down with like all the little details. Does that make sense? Like I start feeling like I need to remember everything for the extract questions and for like the questions that are like about like the conclusion and things like that. And yeah, I guess it just maybe takes practice in figuring out my own flow.
Yeah, well, that's another question is, if you're not going to highlight, or if you decide for whatever reason, whether you highlight or not, that you want to note take, what do you choose to take notes on? And what do you feel is sufficient understanding to allow yourself to walk away from the passage and get into the questions? Because every little detail is too much.
Yeah.
We have to go between every little detail and knowing nothing at all.
Yeah.
I personally like to focus on the main idea, the
Mhm.
author's opinion, the primary purpose, walk away with that specifically, and then have a vague recollection of where the details are so
Mhm.
I can go back and find them when I need to. But
Okay.
this gives me a structural understanding of this was the conclusion, or these were the conclusions
Mhm.
presented in the passage. And this is generally the kind of evidence they used. But I
Mhm.
don't need to understand exactly what that evidence was. If it was, for me, like I wouldn't like the overly technical science stuff. So I
Mhm.
would risk getting bogged down in that because these are terms and phrases I've never even heard before.
Yeah.
So just note where they are so I can find them and go back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, those scare me. I will leave those till the end. Um, so let me see. Mm, so something that in my course that I had taken over last summer, that they had suggested doing was to basically just focus on the questions, like the first like 10 questions first, and then only focus on the questions that you know you're good at and that are your strengths. Um, but I feel like every time I go through the LR sections in all of the tests, I feel like a lot of the questions are questions that I'm not comfortable with, like role, parallel, flaw questions. I think where my strengths lie are necessary assumption, must be true, most strongly supported, strengthen, weaken. And I guess it just kind of feels like 50-50. So um, with parallel questions, I know you mentioned that you had like videos on that, but I guess like with parallel specifically, they just feel like a trick to me, to be honest. Like I have no idea. I feel so lost. Do you have any way to any suggestions on that, I guess? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, we could talk about parallel, but I would
Mm-hmm.
recommend that you focus on the more common question types first. Like
Mm-hmm.
flaw is one of the most common. You're definitely going to see more flaw questions than you will see parallels. And the flaw questions are also easier on average. So I
Mm-hmm.
would master flaw before you spend a lot of time on parallels. I mean, parallels are intimidating. They're everyone's least favorite type, and we can talk about them and I'll give you a few pointers, but I'll just preface by saying start with the flaw and the other types you mentioned. For parallels, they're incredibly time consuming. You're reading 6 stimuli for the benefit of 1 point. So they're a worse return for your time invested.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, my biggest advice is to look at the degree of certainty in the conclusion and look to match that.
Mm-hmm.
So always, never, sometimes, the majority of the time,
Mm-hmm.
look to match that either exactly or with a synonym. The other thing to look at matching is the category of things they're discussing. So all people versus most people versus people who take the LSAT specifically. So if they're narrowing or qualifying, the
Mm-hmm.
category you're talking about in general, that's another easy area to match on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's actually really good. That makes sense. Yeah, so then in that case, for flaw questions, yeah, like I said, I get really bogged down on all the different kinds. Um, what are your suggestions with that?
Yeah, familiarize yourself with the classic logical fallacies
Mhm.
like ad hominem personal attacks, correlation causation confusion, necessary sufficient confusion. I've got about a dozen or so of those that I cover in one of the workshops you'll see. So
Mhm.
I would start there
Okay.
and then just familiarizing yourself with those. And then also recognize that not everything is going to be a classic logical fallacy like you'd see in a logic textbook. A lot of them are just failing to consider something or taking something for granted, but it'll be particular to that particular argument.
Okay. Okay. Then just a random question. How many flaw questions would you say are like on average on tests?
Maybe 4 per
Hmm.
section, something in
Oh,
that ballpark.
that's a lot. Okay. That's definitely something that I feel like I should work on, because before, when it came to parallel, like you said, yeah, they're so long that I just didn't really even bother to focus on them too much because I didn't want to even try to attempt them on the test. Um, but yeah, I was wondering if I could do that with flaw, but it doesn't sound like it.
No, and then regarding what you said about, the first 10 questions and then whatever you're good at, I mean, that seems like advice that almost caters to the middle. Like that advice is not going to get you a 170.
Mm-hmm.
If you were in the 130s, it could help you get to a 145 maybe. But if you're looking for a top score, telling you to like disregard a huge percentage of the questions is not a winning strategy in my book. And that's not really the kind of thing I advocate. I would say first 10 questions in about 10 to 12 minutes. That's what I thought you were going to say, because that's like pacing advice that I often give and other people give as well. It's like basically get through the first 10 questions pretty quickly, because those are the relatively easier ones. Build up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section. And then give yourself a time bank to budget where you can flag and skip certain questions that are the toughest and come back to those at the end. But I would still aim to go into test day with a solid understanding of every question type. I'm just saying, if there's a type that you're going to spend the least time on, I would make it parallels because they are the most time consuming, but I would still aim to understand them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess like with this course, I kind of was just, I felt like they kind of did that a lot, where they were just kind of giving advice for, a sufficient amount of time because it was such a quick course. And yeah, obviously I want to get a 170.
Yeah. I mean, well, the LSAT is complicated enough that you can't teach the entire thing quickly. I mean, there's over a dozen logical reasoning question types alone.
Yeah.
And you could focus on the more common ones like flaw and necessary assumption, but you want 170 plus, we've got to look at everything. And that's why I put workshops together on every question type there is. And then for the most common ones, I did a second one, a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, covering different angles. So I have, for flaws, for example, I think I have 2 workshops on the classic logical fallacies. And then I have a handful on the questions where they don't fit within a neat category.
Okay.
Like just covering actual LSAT questions that were not classic logical fallacies, where again, they took something for granted or they failed to consider something, but that wouldn't fit in a categorization. It's just, let's understand the argument.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like, to be honest, I feel like that's like all of the questions that I really had, but I really want to utilize this hour.
Oh, just, we have a half hour, not a full hour. So we've got
half hour. Okay.
So we've got about 5 minutes remaining, but I want to make sure that you walk away feeling complete. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you have a question, ask away. I'll give you a moment to think of questions, but also know that you can always shoot me an email with follow-ups.
Okay.
As for next steps, I mean, I'm going to recommend you take the next 2 weeks to work on those logical reasoning question types you mentioned, as well as reading comp. For logical reasoning, I'll send you a handful of workshops. I'll send you a reading comp deep dive video as well. And then you can go into the vault for plenty more on all of those. Then after that 2-week mark, then at the end of the month, you start doing the timed work, individual sections to work on pacing, then build up to full-length timed exams.
Okay.
And go to the classes regularly. Logical reasoning every Thursday night for sure, if you can make it. I recommend that. Reading comp is Monday nights. There's also study groups typically before and or after, and take full advantage of those. I mean, the study groups are really, that's where you're going to get the full community experience, because there's no agenda, there's no instructor. There is a teaching assistant to guide the discussion, but it's really a more interactive experience.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think it would just be like a good motivator. And yeah, I think it would just be good to like kind of get more information from you and get more like suggestions just in case if I needed it. So I will let you know on that. But yeah, this was good. I feel motivated and I feel excited to get involved in the community and stuff. And yeah, I really appreciate you meeting with me.
No, for sure, Vanessa. My pleasure. Just out of curiosity, so you're aiming for 170 plus. You're
Yes.
taking the April 30th exam.
Mhm.
How much time are you putting in per week?
Per week, I would say I try to study for around 2 hours every day.
Nice.
Yeah.
What
Mhm.
else do you have going on? Are you working? You're in school?
Working full time, but work has been pretty slow, luckily. And my boss also knows that I'm studying. So it's been nice to have the extra 2 hours during work hours because I work with the team that I work with mostly is in Australia. So I basically have to work from like a lot of times when the classes are taking place. So
Mm.
yeah.
All right. Well, know that they're always recorded. If you ever miss anything, you can
Oh,
always catch them. Everything's recorded, so you can catch them later inside the vault. And there's a most recent video section of the course too, where we put everything that just happened in the past week or so.
gotcha. Okay. Okay, that's helpful. That's good to know. Okay, I feel like, yeah, that's everything that I got.
No, it was great to meet you, Vanessa. If you have any questions, reach out and I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Talk to you soon. Thank you again so much.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.